Welcome everybody to the 2022 More Than Baseball Draft webinar recording. Really appreciate all of our co-hosts here. We've got a lot of different experiences from all across the game, former major and minor and current major and minor league players. Here are going to talk a little bit about their different stories coming up through the draft and through pro ball. So just really excited to have all five of these other guys on here with me. We're just going to do some quick introductions. I'll go first. My name's John Perrin. I was a 27th round pick of the Milwaukee Brewers back in 2015. Spent 5 years in the pro game. Made it up to AAA with a few stops in Mexico, the DR, and Indie ball as well. Dan, how about you, man? Why don't you give us your background?
Yeah. My name is Danny Nunan. I'm a pitcher in the Angels organization. I got drafted out of high school back in 2018. And I spent 3 years in Arizona, and I finally made it out to I'm in Low A right now. I'm playing in Southern California in the Cal League for the Inland Empire 66ers.
Hey, everyone. My name's Buttrey. I was drafted in 2012 by the Boston Red Sox in the 4th round. I spent about 5.5 years with Boston and was traded over to the Los Angeles Angels in 2018. That's where I debuted. I've been there. I've been with the Angels. Since then, I kind of had a abrupt retirement last year, so I am currently working my way to get back to the show, get my body, get everything right. I'm currently playing in Salt Lake City, which is the AAA team for the Los Angeles Angels, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for doing this, guys.
Yeah, appreciate you, Ty.
My name's Simon Rosenblum-Larson, co-founder of More Than Baseball. Recently released by the Tampa Bay Rays, but was a 19th round pick in the 2018 draft. Made it up to AA, spent short season, low A, high A, AA, played in the fall league, pitched in the GCL at various times. So seen the sport, been around the game, and excited to chat with these guys.
Yeah, so my name is Aiden McIntyre. I was drafted in 2018 as a senior out of college, 22nd round by the Oakland Athletics, and I'm currently in Arizona rehabbing, and I spent last season in AA. So currently in Arizona, and we'll be pitching in the ACL here real soon. So I'm glad to be on.
Thank you, brother. Slade Heathcott, co-founder with Simon on More Than Baseball. Was drafted in 2009 in the 1st round by the New York Yankees. Battled injuries for a large part of my career. Was fortunate enough to get to the big leagues here and there. Then retired at the end of the 2018 going into 2019 season. Tried indie ball, but it was just my time to go. And then me, Simon, and Jeremy started working on More Than Baseball. So thank you guys, everybody, for being on.
Yeah, appreciate the intros there, guys. This is a big time for a lot of guys in their careers, getting into pro ball for the first time, going through the draft process. I don't know if I'm the only one here that was fortunate enough to get drafted twice or not, but for some people to go through that and either have to make that choice of whether to sign or not sign. For me, I was coming out of Oklahoma State my junior year, slid, didn't get the dollars that I felt I was worth. So went back to school, and then so just like Aiden, my friend over here, we were both senior signs, so got basically a pat on the butt and a plane ticket and shipped out to the AZL to start the career, and that was just something that I didn't really realize how it was going to work as a senior. Was just that you have no leverage. Here's a couple thousand and a plane ticket, good luck. That was definitely something that was a little bit of a wake-up call for me going through the draft process personally. Do any of you guys have any unique stories or anything through your draft process that you guys care to share, or anything that was maybe unique about the way you went through that process?
Yeah, I'll go, Jonathan. The draft process for me, man, it was pretty crazy. I knew I had, being a high school player, I was signed to go to Arkansas, and so you're back and forth, you're talking to scouts and your agent's talking, your dad's talking, whoever, you're trying to figure out, if I go for this amount of money or if I go in this round. And so I had a pretty good idea that I was probably going to go in the top 5 rounds. I thought there was a chance that I could maybe go in the top 1 or 2 rounds. But it was a pretty hectic day. I remember the whole time my advisor at the time was, we had a number in mind, and when the day hits, you're getting phone calls. It kind of comes down to that for me. Like, it was, if I get this number, I'm going to leave and I'm not going to go play college ball. I'm going to go play and start my professional career. And so it's just, there's the draft process. There's a lot of different scenarios that can happen. I mean, everyone is trying to get drafted. Everyone's trying to get the most money they can, to set them up for their future. And so, what I went through was basically like I had to get a certain amount of money that my dad, my family, and we talked about, that I felt comfortable with foregoing a college education. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal when you don't go to school and you're a high school kid. You're 18, 19 years old. You're jumping into your professional career, and so the day hits and you're kind of going through, you're fielding calls. The agent, the scouts are calling your dad, the scouts are calling your advisors. And it's just kind of it's honestly like a crapshoot. Like, you hear a bunch of stuff going on, and it determines on how you play that year. The first half of my high school senior season, I was pitching great. I was slated to go into the first round, and then I just kind of bombed the second half, and I kind of dropped a little bit. Luckily, Boston called me in the 4th round, and they gave me the number that I wanted. But getting back to that draft story, like, my whole team sat there. It was the last pick of the first round, which was, I think, the Yankees, or the second to last pick. And they call and they're like, hey, or the guy, I think it was Seelig at the time. When was Selig's last year? Bud Selig's last year.
14, 13.
Yeah, or 14. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, he said, he's like, with the first round, whatever, the New York Yankees select Ty, and my whole team jumps up, and then the guy's name was Ty Hensley, and like everyone was like, oh damn it, dude. And it was a crazy experience, man, because I was dealing with some stuff with my high school graduation. Like, they wouldn't let me walk because I had to take phone calls on the day of the draft. It was the most stressful, chaotic day of my life, but luckily the next day I was able to go into the 4th round. But I guess to sum everything up, you really don't know what you're getting into until it happens. You're going to hear a ton of stuff. You're going to have old players call you. My college coach, they were calling me to, try to persuade me to come to school. And I was trying to be, nice kid and say, I want to go, but I also want to play pro ball. And so it's a very weird dynamic. So just honestly expect anything on that day.
Yeah, chaotic is a great word to describe draft day. You got to answer all those random numbers that you never would normally answer.
Yeah.
I was a very different story. I was a junior in college and wasn't expecting to get picked. I had I had talked to 3 teams pre-draft, and that was it. And I'm out to lunch with family. I was actually in New York City, and my dad had a 1-bedroom apartment, so I was sleeping on his floor for like the week of the draft. And I'm out to lunch, and I get a call, and it was like the most. I had actually texted my buddy from my college team. He'd gotten drafted like 8 picks earlier. Noah Zavalis, if you guys on this call know him, but I text him like congratulating him, and I get a phone call as I'm sending the text. And it was one of those sort of like out there things. But pre-draft, I actually had no idea what to expect. I had no sense of slot values. I didn't know what a slot value was. I didn't understand the rule of the $125,000 slot value for any player drafted after the 10th round. And so I had told my advisor at the time, I was like, he asked me, what do you want to take? Instead of explaining me the system, I said, well, I don't know. I'd take, I think I said like 75,000. And I didn't understand that it doesn't actually count against the team to pay a player up to 125,000 after 10 rounds. And so I negotiated with myself down from 125 because I didn't understand the rules of the draft. And I actually probably lost out. I ended up signing for 85,000 in the 19th round, but probably lost out on a good, 40 grand, not knowing the rules of the draft. And that's something that in hindsight, like, I would never make that mistake again. I would start at least at the, the slot value of the pick, much less, a number that was 60% of that. So definitely, like, do your homework. I didn't expect to get picked, and so I didn't expect to be in that position in negotiation. So yeah, I mean, my story is I loved it. It was the greatest day of my life, but looking backwards, like, I lost out on a fair chunk of change because I didn't know the rules.
Yeah, gotta know your worth. Gotta know your worth. I was the exact opposite. I'm so old that it was a firm 100 back then. And once I slipped out of after the 10, I was 100 or no chance. Like, if there's not six figures, I'm not going. And people didn't believe me getting 60, 70. I'm like, no, like, my college degree is worth more than that. Like Ty had mentioned earlier, you gotta know your trade-off. So yeah, definitely important to kind of do a little bit of homework ahead of time.
Yeah, I was gonna say for my draft day, so it was my senior year, and you talk about not having any leverage. So I mean, I was gonna play. I didn't know if I was gonna be drafted at all. So I was expecting either to go the third day of the draft or be a free agent signing. I figured I'd get a shot possibly as a free agent after the draft. But so, like, my senior season was weird. Statistically didn't have a great year. Had a few really good starts at the end, and pretty much I didn't have a single questionnaire, hadn't talked to a team until the second last start of my college career. And then I think I ended up filling out about 20. So it all kind of happened fast.
Better late than never, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was like filling out questionnaires as I'm like getting ready to graduate the day of, like, everyone's over. So it was interesting, definitely a hectic time. But for me, the actual process of the draft, I mean, I knew I was going to go third round, and I didn't have an agent at the time. I didn't have an advisor. So, I mean, I was going to go for whatever I was offered, and didn't have any leverage. And I was 22 years old. So I ended up getting a call in the 21st round or whatever. And it was the A's, who weren't one of the teams I actually had, like, talked the most to. I talked to a handful of other teams. So the A's ended up drafting me in the 22nd round. And my signing bonus was $1,500, which after taxes comes out to about $1,000. Which that was my start to my pro career. So my draft day experience, I mean, I was with family, and the day itself was amazing. And then kind of figuring everything else out after it is definitely chaotic and just a lot. But overall, I mean, I think for a lot of maybe the guys listening to this are going to go pretty early in the draft, making sure they're set up to enjoy that day, whether that's a draft party or whether that is just like family. Because like we've all said, it is kind of hectic and chaotic. So if you can control some of your settings, I think that will benefit guys going forward. So.
Yeah. So going into my senior year, that junior summer that's when I committed to play baseball at the University of Delaware. And I went to an area code tryout, and that's when I started to get a little bit more pro interest. And at the time, I mean, like, my junior baseball season, I was going in there, had like zero college interest. I think I was throwing 78 to 82 in the fall of my junior year. And then going into that high school season, I had picked up a little bit of velo. I was more like 84, 88. And then that summer it was like 86 to 90. So, like, I started to gain some pro interest being like a left-handed pitcher, 6'6". So it was all pretty new to me. And then I got invited to some like they weren't necessarily pre-draft, but like pre-high school season, scouting workouts with a couple pro teams. And that's when I realized that, I wanted to give pro ball an opportunity, like a shot. I wanted to do that and like forego college. So I was pretty much like, if I can get anything over 125K, like, I was going to go. And I didn't really have much interest going into the high school season. Like, some of those teams had fallen off. Then about a month left before the draft, I remember my advisor emailing me and saying, like, hey, like, you know, it's not looking like, you know, nobody's really showing much interest. Like, keep working hard. You know, college might be the best option. And then, you know, a couple weeks after that, the Angels came around. It was the Angels and the Padres who both, you know, started to show a little bit more interest. They were like, you know, will you sign for this? And I think the Padres, they wanted to offer me 125, and I was like, no, like, I want to get something more than that. And then the Angels ended up, you know, matching something that I thought, you know, was doable for me, and that number ended up being 200,000, and I decided to forego college for that number. And I don't regret it at all, because I've made so many, like, priceless relationships, and, you know, I've taken classes and stuff throughout my pro career so far. So
again, just coming back to knowing what you're worth and being able to stick to a number and trusting that you're good enough to get it. Slade, I actually have never heard your draft story before. I'm looking forward to this one.
Well, we're gonna keep it Slade Heathcott short. I'm gonna work on that. Man, we had just won semifinals. My process started I was late. I started getting some, like, interest at the D1 level, like, my sophomore year. I was a lefty. I never intended being an outfielder, which is part of it. But like, my sophomore summer, I was already in the, like, 90, 92 sitting range. So I started getting interest. But I was also pretty big into football. So my scholarship was 50% football, 50% baseball to LSU. Junior summer, it was kind of pretty clear that I was going to be in the first round. I was sitting 95, 97, and I had already started having conversations with teams. So my draft day, we had just arrived actually at Round Rock. That's where we played our state championship game. So we had just arrived from our workout after Baylor, and we had a draft party in the hotel room with the baseball team, which was super cool for me at that time. I was currently, like, living out of my truck and things of that nature. So I went through the advisor, the financial advisors, the agency. I kind of went all through that, like, solo. So that was very interesting to kind of looking back now where things were good, things were bad. But yeah, and then I was fortunate enough to be able to get drafted in the first round. Next day, I won the state championship in Texas. So that was super cool. I had actually I did not plan on going to the Yankees. The Yankees wanted to draft me as an outfielder, and I wanted to be drafted as a pitcher. So I had a deal in place. Orioles had a supplemental first that year, and it was my slot was a lot different. I was in a position where I was double slot for either one team, but I thought I was going to Baltimore as a pitcher. And the Yankees took me like 6 or 7 picks prior to the Baltimore's pick. So that is a very long story short.
Yeah, that's interesting. So was there
probably a lot different?
Was there ever, like, did you kind of have a similar situation as like Ty and Dan, where there was a number that you were throwing out there that, like, you got to hit this number, I'm going to play at LSU? Or was it in your head like, hey, at the end of the day, like, I want to go play pro ball and sign for this much money?
I mean, I knew that I was going to be, being realistic, I knew I was going to be a first rounder. And, like, this goes into a whole nother conversation of, look, in terms of pay compensation from first round to the third round, things of that nature, like that's a whole nother conversation. But I knew that I was, like, I knew I was going to be in the slot that I was, just because of conversation. At that time, there wasn't a team that I wasn't talking to. So it just, the thing about the draft process that was so crazy is like my deal with Baltimore was for more money, quite a bit more money. And it was crazy that we even told the Yankees that I wasn't going to sign with them. And they still drafted me, which is crazy because one way or the other, it's just crazy how little input you really do get, even from the top to the very bottom, hearing draft stories for the last pick, right? And you can be the first or second overall pick. And you've seen it in the past with first rounders that the league denies. The Rangers have had it a couple times, right? Like my year, was a Matt Perk. It's like number 4 or 5 overall pick, got his $6.5 million signing bonus denied by the league. And he was screwed because that's how the draft process works. So here was a clear top 10 player in the country that didn't get a choice, which is crazy.
A very similar case with Kumar Rocker, right? Where there was he was offering. I don't even think they ended up offering him anything. The Mets didn't even offer him a signing bonus.
Yeah.
And he was told basically, you can't sign with any other team because we drafted you, but we're not going to offer you a contract. And so he's now playing indie ball and re-entering the draft this year. But
I also, at that time, like going in the draft process, I had no understanding how long contracts were owned. I didn't understand that like who you sign with, you're there unless they choose to let you go for 6 years. Like there was a lot of things like that I had no idea that I learned that. And I also was very ignorant in the process. So when I got drafted and showed up to GCL, I was like, what the hell is this? So it's just riding in the middle of state of Florida for 5 hours on a bus that might have AC. So it was just it was an interesting process.
That is crazy.
I want to say something on that real quick too. I think that was something that stood out to me. I know we're going to get into this naturally in this conversation, but Slade made a good point. Like you really don't know, you hear about the minor leagues, that baseball players, no one goes straight from high school or college straight to the MLB. I mean, it's extremely rare. I think Al Kaline was, one of the only ones to do it or something back in the 50s. And so, you really don't have that education of, teams do have control over you for a certain amount of time. And I think that, the GCL, all these levels, I was pretty naive to it. And I think that's also where you find a good friend group or a good, your family member or an advisor that can kind of tell you, hey, I didn't know there was low A short season, low A long season, high A. I just thought it was, single A, rookie ball, single A, double A, triple A. And not that it's a bad thing. It's just, it goes to show that there is a big education process when coming into the draft that a lot of players are not aware of.
Ty, the stat is actually 21 players since 1900 have played in the big leagues without playing in the minor leagues. 21.
Wow. How many of those were in the 2020 season?
I don't know.
I think there was three or four.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple more.
Yeah, it's a very small number of the 25,000 I think now that have played in the big leagues. So I think that's
I'd be curious to see what it looks like after the last 2 years. But I know in the past the average career, like, and that's also like, that's a good thing, right? The confidence of like, I'm going to be in the big leagues in 2 years, right? And just not understanding the economy of baseball, especially with how data and stat driven we are now as a game. It's just I would think that Simon, the average is probably in the 5 area.
Yeah, I mean, most players are playing in the minor leagues for 4.5 years.
Yeah.
Before they reach the major leagues, and for high school players, right, that number is between 6 and it's 5 or 6 years for a high school guy, and for a college guy, right, it can be a little lower, but that's still, I mean, you're not getting the big leagues in a year. It's very, very rare that guys will do that, and if they do, oftentimes they'll end up back in the minor leagues anyway for a period of time because of option years, and so. Yeah, I mean, the minor leagues are going to be your life for the first few years after you're drafted. You're not going to be under the lights in a big league stadium, more than likely in the first 2-3 years after you're drafted.
Yeah, I think also, like, to add in, it's also different in every organization. So And that's not something that you can even understand until really you get into pro ball, because it's not as a high school or a college kid. You can't talk to one guy from all 30 teams. So you really don't know. Some organizations move guys a lot faster. Some don't. I mean, I know like different, especially, I mean, for high school or even like some teams with like seniors out of college, they'll, when I was like going through the draft process, like there was a few teams who were like, they want to move seniors as fast as possible because I'm already technically old. And that also isn't the case with some teams, but that's definitely something that I think you can't understand until like you're in it. And then at that point, you don't really have any control over it. Kind of like Slade said with the draft is, I mean, you can tell a team that you're not going to sign with them and they'll still draft you. And there's really not much you can do about it. So that's pro baseball.
That's well, you guys bring it right in. So we might as well just jump right into that next topic of kind of basically, you know, kind of twofold. Like, what was some of the things that you guys wish that you would have known going into pro ball, particularly about the minor leagues, but just pro ball in general going into it? I know you guys had already mentioned a couple, but was there anything that just like really just punched you in the face when you first signed, or for that first year of pro ball, that just was a huge eye opener that you guys were just like, wow, I had no idea it was going to be like this?
I was lucky. I started my career in short season A ball in Hudson Valley, which is like, I think it's now a AA team, one of the best places to play baseball. But I was getting paid. We got paid $11.50 a month that year. So I got, my first paycheck was like $475 for 2 weeks of work. And I'm at that point, the team had us with host families, and my host family, I was in an 8x12 room with 2 beds, and I was sleeping on a cot. My teammate was sleeping on a twin bed, and the cot would collapse in the middle of the night every couple of nights. So I'd never know whether I'd be sleeping on the floor or on my cot. And that was, I mean, I played in the Northwoods League in college, and that league, I had a better, like in terms of conditions and treatment, I had a better summer there than I did in my first year of minor league baseball. But obviously minor league baseball, the competition is way higher. You know, it's a much more challenging environment to play. You got tons of fans in the stadium. I mean, it's really like it's a totally different experience, but it was just funny how much, you know, professional baseball looked like unpaid college summer ball. And it never, I mean, it changes as, you know, the game has changed a lot in the last 4 years. There's been some improvements, but really, I mean, it's a grind, and that's not a joke, right? It's you're going to have to work day in and day out. You're not going to make enough money to, you know, support yourself in the offseason. You're going to have to work second jobs. You're going to have to, you know, put everything on the line for this career. And yeah, it's the best thing you'll ever do in your life, but it's also one of the hardest things you're ever going to do. And so that was something that I did not comprehend. I'd heard stories, but I just, you know, the wake up call of walking to a clubhouse, guys are, you know, calling their families to ask to borrow money. Guys are looking around trying to figure out how they're going to pay their cell phone bill. Like, that's the reality of minor league baseball. And there's 2 sides to it. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever done. I love playing under the lights, running out on the mound, like seeing a hitter step in the box. You're in a pressure situation. Like, that is my favorite thing in the world. And one of my least favorite things in the world is having to, you know, pick up multiple jobs in the off season or figure out a way to put food on the table because I'm not getting paid all that much to play baseball. So the game has 2 sides to it, and both sides are really, really, really real, and you should know them before you get into the game.
Yeah, Simon, I appreciate you saying that. I want to jump on that. I have 2 points I want to make about the biggest shock, I guess, of professional minor league baseball. One is the grind that you talked about. You know, I think as any athlete that prides themselves on being a hard worker, somebody that doesn't want to complain, you know, we got to the 1% of our skill set. You know, no one wants to be somebody that's sitting there being the victim and, you know, look at me, you know, I can't handle this. We all want to suck it up. We all want to do the best job we can. But like you said, the reality is it's tough. It sucks at times, you know, especially at the lower levels. And that was something that I don't think anyone can really prepare for. The bus trips, you know, the bad food, the bad hotels. Obviously, you're a young kid and you're just trying to get to the top. And so, you know, being able to sit there and to, you know, separate, okay, I can't control this situation. I can only control my process, my work ethic, going out there and trying to perform against the best of the best. It's a hard thing. Obviously those, you know, as myself, there's gaps. There's players that have a lot of money that come out of high school and they're bonus babies, and the minor leagues is a lot more luxurious for them, I guess you could say, than college players that don't have that. And you have different cultures within that too, and so there's all kinds of things that are going on with the grind, and you will hear the grind throughout your career, and it's true. My biggest advice for that is to go out there, to be relentless. It's going to change. Obviously, things are happening right now. They're unfolding. People are starting to kind of, teams are starting to wake up a little bit. And I think we're on the right track. One thing I want to completely shifting into a new discussion is not to be the nice guy. I came in, and that was something for me where it's a very competitive environment. Coaches, when you get into an organization, you got drafted because you have a unique skill set. Whether you're fast, you throw hard, you have a great off speed, you do something very, very well. And if you're a nice kid and you want to please people, and you want to always, make sure that because you think back of when you're in high school and you're in college, you want all your teammates to like you. You want to be accepted. You want the coaches, you want the coach to appreciate what you do. And it's a little bit of a different, it's a big shift. It's a business. And I was always that was one of my biggest issues, was I was always trying to please people around me. And it really, I would say it prohibited me and prohibited my growth. I was always changing my delivery. One coach would tell me something, I would do that. Another coach would tell me another thing, I changed that. And I wasn't confident in who I was as a player coming into professional baseball. And that was something where, if you're not careful, you get to a point where you look back and you say, who am I? Who am I as a player? This isn't who I was. I was a better pitcher in high school than I am 4 years in the Pro Bowl. I've lost 6-7 miles an hour, and I've spent all this time trying to become the best, and you listen to coaches because they're professionals, and you think that they have your best interests out for you. In reality, coaches like to put their marks on players, and you hear that a lot. Coaches, they want to put their mark on you to, hey, I taught him his curveball, now he's in the big leagues, and look at me, I made that player do that. I think that's an element, but I also think, coaches are in this organization to help develop players, and every organization develop players completely different. Some organizations are terrible at developing players. Other organizations are really, really good, just like certain colleges are good and certain colleges aren't. I find that to be very true within professional baseball as well.
I just want to touch on that real quick, because out of my 10 years of playing, I had 8 surgeries in my 10 years of playing. And if I could change one thing about this whole process, from just starting to talk to people to nutrition advice, like the whole gamut, right? The one thing I would change is that when I got into the game, and this is not a knock on coaching, so Ty, this is right along where you're talking about. This isn't a knock on coaching, but it's very true. Everything Ty said, the one thing that I would change about my entire career is I wouldn't have changed who I was as a player when I got into the game, thinking that minor league baseball is, and the coach is like, you have to do something different that big leaguers do. And that's just not true. It really isn't. Some of the best players in the game right now, the younger players, specifically refuse to change who they were, even when coaching said that. Bo Bichette Jr. is a perfect example. He absolutely refused to change his swing, and that happens a lot. So if my biggest advice to players going in is exactly what you said, Ty. You did something right to get where you are. That doesn't mean you cannot get better, and that doesn't mean you shouldn't listen, but definitely have a filter.
Yeah, I totally fell into that trap of, listening to coaches just blindly and not knowing myself enough to know, what worked for me and like what was going to make me better and get me to the big leagues. I really, as soon as I signed that contract, it's like I just believed everything that was thrown at me, because when I was 18 years old and I wanted to think that a professional organization that they had it all figured out, which, as we all know now, like that couldn't be further from the truth. And I think this could happen to college guys, it could happen to high school guys, but definitely for younger guys, they could, fall into that trap of really just not knowing themselves and what's going to make them better, and just blindly following advice because they want to be likable or they want to, please the coaching staff.
They want to be coachable,
Yep.
Oh man, I have just a on point story to what Ty was talking about how coaches want to put their stamp and coming into pro ball and wanting to change things right away. Like I was a sinker slider guy, 2-seam slider, my entire pro career, all of college too. Get to pro ball, and we're throwing like our first bullpen in the AZL, and our pitching coordinator walks up behind me. He goes, "Is that a 2-seam?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm a sinker slider guy." He goes, 4-seam only, until you have to earn your ability to throw a 2-seam at the lower levels in this organization. Like you don't need to throw a 4-seam until AA unless I let you. And I just was like, is this guy I thought he was joking. Like I laughed, like I legitimately thought he was joking, and he was 100% serious. And it was just mind boggling to me. Like, it was like a whole bullpen that first day was just 4 seams middle down. Like you couldn't move them. You couldn't go to the corners. You couldn't do anything. And I was mind boggled. And then that guy got fired like a year later. And now the Brewers have like 2 Cy Young Award contenders and like 5 All-Stars on their pitching staff. So, it just goes to show you, not every organization has pitching development figured out. They did get a lot better people. I mean, their pitching development now is insane, but it did take a change. And kind of along that same line, as far as organizations not being on the same developmental track, that first year, the Brewers hired David Stearns from Houston, completely changed the organization's culture at the minor league level. I was with them for 3 years under that regime. It was super cool to see the development. But then I get traded to the Royals, completely different organization again, completely different developmental philosophy, completely different organizational philosophy. And again, I kind of got another culture shock. I was like, wait, like this, okay, like this is what we're doing here. So every organization can be so different. And like anyone that's ever been traded, Ty, you've been traded, or just signed as a free agent with a different group. Like it really is a stark difference from organization to organization, depending on where you sign.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with like what everything was said about like kind of like knowing how to say no and knowing what you're good at. And I think the hard thing with that is, especially if you're young, is my recommendation is pretty much if you can get outside help. So maybe a training facility, a coach that you've worked with for a long time, pretty much somebody that you can trust, so that when you get thrown into these situations where suddenly it's like, we want you to change this or that, it's not just you having to make the decision to say no. And that way you kind of have more confidence in it. Cause I think that's the hard thing, is if you don't have confidence that like your stuff can translate to being a big leaguer, then you're most likely not going to be able to tell a pitching coach no. And honestly, it's one of the best things you can do. I know more guys that I got drafted, like the amount of guys I know that I got drafted with who are really good at something and are now all not playing baseball anymore because they changed their swing, they changed the approach, they changed slots, they changed this. So I do think that there's a lot of guys I know who made changes and like are out of baseball. There's very few guys I know who made like that one little change and suddenly they're now in the big leagues. Most of the guys who are in the big leagues, like you could see it when you're playing with them. Like that guy looks like a big leaguer, he plays like a big leaguer. It's not usually like one coach telling him to move his hands that makes that guy a big leaguer.
Yeah, very good point.
Yeah, trust
Aiden,
your talent.
real quick, I got a funny story. I had a guy, nice kid, and he would sit there and I would watch him do it. And I'm like, how does he do this? Like, how does he just straight up lie to these coaches? And they would tell him things. He'd be throwing a bullpen and they'd be like, hey, throw this pitch here or do this, try this or do this. And he'd say, okay, yeah. And then he would literally just go and do the exact same thing that he did. And they were like, and they'd be like, no, like, you got to do this. He'd be like, okay, yeah, I got it. And he would do it. And he spent his whole career just saying, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And would just do the exact same thing that he was doing. And no one gave this guy shit. No one really questioned him.
No.
They just kind of let him do his thing. I'm like, this guy
Yeah.
figured it out, man. Like,
Well,
that's so smart.
Another point of that is like, you don't have to be a dick about saying no. That's the point where I feel like players get that wrong. It's like they want to like put their foot down and like they're gonna blow up. And it's like it's you're a professional. This is your career. If you think something is not beneficial for your career, you can say no. And it's like it's the whole joke of, I mean, you play enough years in the minors, like what are they gonna do? Release me? But like that really is like it doesn't usually like it's if a team's trying to make you kind of change into something that you can't buy into, then it really is like you can't do it. So like that point of that bullpen, like I've thrown multiple bullpens. I came out of college, I only threw a 4-seam, had a lot of carry, and I would throw these bullpens where every fastball is supposed to be down and away. And I'm just sitting there just throwing 15 fastballs at the very top of the zone. And so they're just like, this guy has terrible command, but like that's how I was going to pitch in games. But it took me like 2 years to figure out that like I just needed to do that, not like throw fastballs at the bottom of the zone pretty much.
And the big part about that is like once you have a little success, most of the time they just kind of leave you alone. Like that was my like kind of the same thing. Like my pitching coach in low A was super cool. He was like, absolutely not. Like you're going to throw your sinker. I'll wear it. Like I'll protect you. So I had a coach in the organization that I could trust and was like willing to kind of be the shield. And then I had a really good first full year, and then nobody ever said anything about it.
Nobody cares. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like another thing too, is like your performance buys you your freedom. Like if you play well, teams aren't going to try to change you. And the frustrating thing is if someone's like, I've seen it with really good hitters who like, they'll struggle for like a month and then they'll try to like change everything versus like, it could have just been a bad month. Like pro season's long. So just because if you don't come in and have like immediate success, that doesn't mean that you should suddenly change everything. Like you do need to give it time to kind of adapt to your situation. So.
Yeah, that's great perspective. And then, I know we're getting a little long on time, so I just kind of want to wrap things up, and I'll kind of pose this question to our two big leaguers here in the group as far as, we've talked a lot about like how to kind of maintain and build success, but what have you felt has separated the guys that get over the hump and the guys that you played with at the big league level from the guys the good players in the minor leagues that just didn't quite get there or couldn't quite put it all together to get over the hump? What would you say is the biggest separator or separators for those guys at that level?
I'll kick it off. I think Aiden really hit on most of it right there. I think the one thing that I was guilty of this, and that's why I would go back and change. The one thing I would listen to is not listening to coaches. And it wasn't a knock on the coaches. It's just that teams in the past, and teams have gotten better and they're continuing, but it's always been a cookie cutter, right? I don't know how many times I got called in saying that I needed to play like Derek Jeter, or I needed to act like Derek Jeter, or things of that nature. It just doesn't, like, I would have 1 or 2 meetings a week. Don't change because of what we call slumps. Don't change who you are, because the first time you change it and say you have success for a short term, well, anyone that's been on this call understands that, guess what? Those lows of the roller coaster ride of baseball are going to happen. They are. And sometimes they happen less frequently than others. But as soon as you try to change something to fix a mental change, and you're changing physical things, you start losing who you are as a player. And I think that was a very detrimental part of my career, because I started changing, and I even tell you I'd have a bad month and I would just change. I would change and figure out. And I was athletic enough to be mediocre long enough and fortunate enough to be what they call, and y'all brought up, bonus babies. So I got way more opportunities than I should have gotten. But when I was changing on a daily basis, because the game of baseball is just hard, right? Like, that was one thing I didn't understand. Like, don't change who you are. You can adjust. The game is a game of adjustments. Adjust who you are. Don't change who you are. And I think there's two big differences there.
For me, there's a couple things. I do think you have guys that are just genetic freaks, man. Guys that are just athletic. They just do things naturally really, really well. And so you're always, that's as Slade said, comparing yourself. Organizations may say try to do it like this, and it's just hard. Everyone's mental game is different. Everyone's physical game is different. And so you don't want to get into a comparison spot. You want to have people that you look up to, obviously, that, man, he plays the game hard this way. I would like to play the game hard like that. So, you have, not comparing yourself to others, being able to flush bad games. That was something that was so hard for me. I'm 10 years into professional ball, and I probably just figured out how to flush a bad game. I would have a bad game and it would eat at me for 2-3 days. I'd drive around after I'd give up some runs. I felt like a baby, and I'm like, man, I'm a professional athlete. Why can't I just get over this? And so that's kind of a common denominator you see with some of the greats, is their ability to focus in when they have to perform. And then when the result it's over, they're the same person, whether they're good or whether they're bad. And I truly mean that. Like, it's impressive. You almost think like, hey, like, anyone home at times, like, are you good? But like, they just have this ability to separate the game from who they are as a person to who they are as a baseball player. And like I said, you see some people that just eat, sleep, and breathe the game, and they're just, they're baseball rats. And there's other people that have a different process. So you have, not comparing yourself to others, being able to separate it. The mental game. And when I say the mental game, if you're an overthinker, for me, I was an overthinker. So I would journal. I had years and years of journals, day 1, day 2, day 3, I'd write every day. I'd come home, after a game of catch, I'd write down how I felt, what I did. And it helped get all these thoughts in my head onto paper. I got big into meditation, being able to control my breath. I found a coach that I can go to. I wasn't finding it at the field. And so having somebody in your corner that when shit hits the fan, you can call, that has an unbiased perspective, that can kind of give you the truth. If you have a hobby, enjoy that hobby, and so that's a bunch of things. And the reason I say it, there's not just one thing. There's not one thing that everybody's different. Some players keep the game extremely simple. That was always my big knock, and you guys can probably just tell. That was kind of one of my issues, was I was an overthinker. And so I would actually change when I was extremely successful. And that's probably the dumbest thing you can do, is when you're having those good moments, keep doing the same thing. Literally, don't change shit. Don't listen to anybody. Don't try to change a new workout. Keep doing what you're doing because you're having success. There's a lot of things, man. I could, you can kind of see, like, it's not just one thing. Some players, it is just one thing. They're really good at hitting a ball, catching it, and throwing it. And so you got to kind of know who you are as a player.
Yeah, it's the overarching theme from the whole conversation. Just really seems to be yourself, trust your own physical talents, and just go do your thing. I really appreciate the time, guys. This was super informative. I hope everybody gets a lot out of this. Tons of good perspective and insight from a bunch of guys that have been there, played in the big leagues, are in the middle of their process of grinding through the minor leagues, whether to get there for the first time or to get back. So I just really appreciate all the time and all the great insights that you guys were able to provide today. And we'll talk to you guys again soon.